Well, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. This is Carly Stevens Books, and I am really excited to have Patricia Raybon here with me. She is a Colorado author, essayist, and novelist who writes daring and exciting novels and books at the intersection of faith and race. Her devotional writing appears in Our Daily Bread, where she's a regular contributor. She also authors the Annalee Spain Mysteries, an exciting history mystery featuring a young Black theologian, a fan of Sherlock Holmes who solves crime and consequence during Colorado's dangerous 1920s Klan years. The series debut, All That Is Secret, won the 2022 Christie Award for First Novel, which is just incredible for anybody who's not in the mystery space. And was a Parade Magazine Fall 2021 Mysteries We Love selection, a masterpiece on PBS, Best Mystery Books of 2021 pick, and Steph Curry's March 2022 personal choice for the NBA Stars Literati Book Club, which is just one of my favorite little tidbits about that book. Patricia's personal essays on faith, family, and race have been published in the New York Times Magazine, Newsweek, USA Today, USA Weekend, the Denver Post, and featured on National Public Radio's Weekend Edition. So I am just so honored to be able to talk to you today about some of your incredible work, Patricia.
Thank you, Carly. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, well, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into writing in the first place?
You can hear my hesitation, but here's my answer. I was born Black in a time of Jim Crow segregation. And I was raised under Jim Crow segregation. And even as a young child, I didn't understand why it was happening, why certain people were targeted. I didn't know how to say, at 4 or 5 years old, I did not know how to say, there's something wrong with this paradigm.
Mm.
And so I started, as soon as I could learn to read and write, I started to write about it. I'd write little stories and reflections. And I had a third grade teacher who asked me, did I want to be a writer when I grew up? And I said, yes. I was so excited by her question.
Mm.
But what she did was turn it around and affirm me. And she said, you are a writer.
Mm.
And so it's an interesting question, Carly, because for all of us, seriously, the one thing that is our burden or our problem or challenge can, on the flip side, become the thing that's our inspiration. And that's precisely what has happened with me.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. And it's amazing that you started off your very first writing ventures getting into this territory that not everybody was willing to talk about in such an open, transparent kind of way, which is really what I wanted to talk to you about and learn from you about. Um, I was so impressed as I was going through your whole catalog of novels and memoirs and all of your pieces. You do not shy away from those topics that are, Thanksgiving taboos, faith and race in particular. Like it said in your bio, that intersection of faith and race. Um, I think I think it is so crucial to talk about these things and make positive, non-hateful progress in America, certainly, about these issues. So for people who want to join in that conversation in fruitful ways, what guidelines would you suggest for writers who are interested in talking about similar things?
I like what Dr. Rosemary Allen says. She's the cultural equity expert on 9 News here in Denver. And she says, be curious. She says two things: be curious and be culturally humble.
Mm,
That's the description that she uses. And I love those ideas because
mm,
um, it takes people out of a place of being fearful or afraid, worried that they're going to step on toes. It also moves people beyond the place that a lot of people have been living in that says, with regard to race in particular, and even now with regard to faith, that these are topics that are taboo, and so you shouldn't talk about them.
mm.
So what happens is then in a world, in a multicultural world like we are here in the United States, you have, huge swaths of the population who have no experience or very little experience thinking about, reflecting on, understanding, talking about matters of race. And as a person of faith, I observe the same thing, that there are huge swaths of people who won't talk about faith, or if they do, it's in derogatory, judgmental way.
Mm.
Well, when you're talking about aspects of people's lives that are um, so ever present, but then you're telling them to be quiet, you're erasing their experience. They basically say, "Shut up and go away."
Mm,
Well,
mm.
that's not going to teach anybody some exciting, interesting things they could learn about themselves if when we take a minute and learn something about other people, about people who are different, people whose life lived experience is different than one's own. So it's
Okay.
about being curious. That's it for me. And since am a writer, curiosity doesn't kill the cat. Curiosity it fills up the writes books and articles and essays and mystery novels.
So curiosity and humility, you think are pretty foundational to just entering into that conversation. I love
Yeah,
that. It's so simple, but it's true. It's not like these topics should be taboo. I mean, they are part of everyone's experience in some form or fashion, and so we ought to have the language for it. Yeah, that's
right.
interesting. So since you do write both fiction and nonfiction, what are some of the benefits of tackling some of these ideas in one format versus, or I guess not format, but one genre versus the other? What have you found?
Love that question. And what I have found is that people have different reading habits and different reading. They have entered conversations through different doors. And so
Mm.
I have I encountered people who never read fiction and are, in fact, are a bit snobbish about it. And so they're probably unlikely to read one of the Annalee Spain mystery
Which
novels.
is a shame because they sound so cool. I read the blurb and I'm like, "What?" I think I will have to read this.
Have to look at this.
But
But
anyway,
on
like
the
you were
flip
saying.
side, on the flip side, are people who are strongly drawn to nonfiction. I was at the Barnes and Noble store in Loveland on this past weekend for a book signing, and so as people pass my book table, my first question is, "Do you like mysteries?" And a lot of people do. And that gives me an opportunity to talk to people. But I talked to a woman on Saturday, and she said, "Oh no, I never read fiction. I certainly wouldn't read a mystery. I get everything that I need from nonfiction books and articles." And so, those are sort of like two camps. There's a third of people who read both. But to answer your question, um, I have had to honor and understand those different audiences.
Mm,
What I love to experience, Carly, is when someone who would not read an essay that I've written on a racial matter will find themselves reading an entire novel about a young Black woman who's an amateur sleuth.
mm,
So the those different doors, though, provide opportunity for people. You know, when I go to book clubs, I have one coming up in Longmont, and I get invited to book clubs a lot, and I really enjoy it.
mm,
But what I hear from people is how they didn't know how they would experience the book, or they never read a novel, even fiction readers. They never read a novel centered on a young Black woman.
oh, wow.
And so it's an interesting opportunity. It's been exciting for opportunity for me to find myself in this space, this particular space. But I love meeting people who are um, invited through this protagonist's adventures to experience her life, experience the life, a fully dimensional life of a young Black woman. And it's historical fiction, which everybody, you know, a lot of people really love. So it becomes a safe way for people to explore through the eyes and the life of a young Black woman. Um, Her journey in the 1920s in my state, in Colorado, when the Klan was a huge political bloc and ruled the state politically. Um, and so, you know, to learn about that, somebody could go to a history book. Somebody could go on PBS or watch a documentary, and then somebody else may say, "Oh, here's a mystery novel," and becomes a safer way to get into the topic.
Mm. You're speaking my language. I am such an advocate for fiction's ability to be that safe space to walk in somebody else's shoes, and I know I've benefited from that experience of reading from the perspective of people who are in one way or another unlike me, and I've seen it time and time again. I think it's such an incredibly powerful way of exploring some of those ideas without having the walls up that sometimes nonfiction um, can put up for people. Um,
Exactly. Robert
yeah.
McKee says, "We go to fiction not to escape life, but to find it."
Mm,
And you know, great fiction. I mean, great literary fiction. That's certainly true of great literary fiction. And and the idea that it might be true of a little, you know, mystery series is, you know, an interesting thing to consider.
yeah. What is it that you hope people get out of your work, whether it be your mystery series or some of your memoirs or devotionals? Seems like there's some common themes there. So, ideally, what would you like people to take away?
I want people to learn to see one another,
Mm,
um, and also see themselves.
mm, mm,
And you know, as in terms of the faith writing that I do, I'm really hoping to normalize faith. It
mm,
has become a very, as you know, very polarized
mhm.
um, area now in our country and in our culture. Um, and but I I grew up in my faith, and it's you know, I always say I've been Black every day in my life in America. I've also been a person of faith every day in my life in
Mm,
America. And and so I find those two arenas um, sort of my home base. And so, but at the same time, in those places, Carly, I need to find in those places a way to learn to know other people too.
Mm.
Otherwise, those places are not legitimate. So um, I, um, do the writing for that reason to know more about myself, know more about, learn more about others, and hope that other people experience the writing in the same way.
Mm. That's beautiful. It sounds like you're definitely embracing that curiosity, humility kind of model. I'm fascinated by what you said about how, of course, for you, race and faith have just been such an inseparable part of you for your entire life. And yet you want to make sure that you're looking from other people's perspectives as well. That's not something that I hear all that often when um there is a kind of perspective that is at times a polarizing perspective. Sometimes people will just like here's me, here's my experience. Um and I assume that that's like do you do you think that that's still a legitimate way to write, or do you think it's essential to consider other people's perspectives even when other people might be the majority? I'm not sure if I'm making a lot of sense.
No,
I just want to clarify what
I
you
hear
meant
your
by that. That was really interesting.
I hear your question, and I really appreciate it, Carly. I'm a journalist by training. My two degrees are in journalism, and I spent most of my working life as a newspaper reporter here in Denver. I worked at the Denver Post and at the Rocky Mountain News,
Cool.
and then taught journalism for 15 years up at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And so, one of the hallmarks of good journalism and a free press is that it should be objective and should provide all sides.
Mm,
And so when people are moving through the world with in in a bubble or in a silo
mm,
and only engage with people who have the same point of view, they'll rarely will you learn anything new,
mm.
not only about the other person, but about oneself. That that growth only happens when we're outside of those bubbles and silos. So and so in terms of my professional career, I heard that drummed in hard when I was a student in journalism programs, and then tried to teach it when I was in um, teaching in journalism in a journalism program. But it also works in our own lives too.
Mm.
Oh, here's a different view. Let me step back and see what I learn if I contemplate it and get close to it. If there's the opposite of that is to always be moving around in fear of the other.
Mm. Right, which doesn't benefit anyone and just creates more of those fissures
People,
between
right?
people. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing. I think your work sounds truly fascinating. So, how can people find you and your work online?
Okay. Well, like everybody, I have a website. I'm at patriciaraybon.com. And of course, my publishers want us all to be on social media. So people can find me on those typical places. I'm still on Facebook, which I actually enjoy. I'm still on I'm still on Twitter, Carly. I have signed up for Threads, but after I signed up, I haven't been in that community much. So, but
It's
I am on
impossible to be
Twitter.
on everything. I'm not judging over here.
Yeah, and Instagram. So, what did I leave anything out? I think that. Oh, and I'm just getting my feet wet on LinkedIn, but all those typical places.
Okay, and it's at Patricia Raybon,
.com.
for all of
Mhm.
them? Okay. All right, I'll put those links down below for anybody who is interested in getting to know more about Patricia or looking up some of these works. So thank you once again for talking with me. I just feel so honored that you shared your experience and answered all my all my funky questions.
Not at all. I'm honored to be with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Uh-huh. Well, for those of you watching, thank you. Thank you for being here. Like this video if you like it. Make sure to subscribe for more writing, publishing, and indie author life stuff. And I'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye bye.